I would say we are kicking off our session, and everyone who joins after is also able to see the recording afterwards. Well, welcome everyone to our 5th Women in Tech Hiring Fair we are hosting at VanHack. In order to kick off our event, actually, I'm super excited to be joined today by 3 incredibly wonderful leaders here on my side. We have Alana from HiMama, who's CTO and co-founder. We have Lisa from SkyWatch, who's the director of engineering, and we do have Katya, who is the CTO and co-founder of BioRender. Thanks for all of you to be here today. Today's session will be about how we can create more diverse and inclusive work environments for specifically with a focus on women. As we all know, organizations all around the world are trying to achieve a more diverse and inclusive work environment, but also, as we all know, there is still quite a long way to go. And let's discuss some initiatives and some insights from the 3 of you. Hopefully help other organizations to increase their environment to attract more women. In order to start, I would like to invite you to quickly give an insight about your journey. How did you actually decided to start working in the field of engineering? And I'm gonna be quiet now. Maybe Alana, if you don't mind, to start.
Sure. I definitely didn't follow, as far as I think, a logical or traditional path into engineering. I always joke that I think the reason that I was curious about engineering was because I didn't really know what it was originally. We don't always get exposure to that early on in school, and I didn't really enjoy any of the other obvious fields where we had studied them actually in school. So I think I did understand, though, that there was creative problem solving involved in engineering, and that has always been what I love. I really enjoy the creation process. I love seeing gaps in what could be and imagining and also creating solutions. And so engineering really allows people to do that. And I still truly love that aspect of it. So, along my journey, I kind of worked in a more corporate environment first. And then I moved on to tech startups and really found that was kind of the great intersection for me between the creative problem solving and also the flexibility of different and dynamic work environments. So that's where I've been for probably the last 15 years, is in the tech startup space.
Thanks. Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, cool to hear a little bit about your journey, Alana. I did kind of like growing up. I was always pretty good at like math and sciences, and my father was an engineer, so it was never something like I couldn't do, I guess. But in terms of computer science specifically, it wasn't something I really considered as a degree when I was applying to universities. I actually went into business because I wanted to start my business. And then someone suggested I take a computer science course, and I did. And it just made it so much sense to me that you could use this skill to create things in the world. And if in the end I wanted to start my own business, it seemed like a really useful skill to have. So ended up studying computer science, and it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And then ended up studying. I worked for a couple of years as a software engineer, ended up studying BioRender about 4.5 years ago, and now we are almost 100 people and 25 on the engineering side. So it's been super exciting.
For me, I grew up on a farm. I didn't have any exposure to technology. When I was in high school, computer programming was offered and I was curious. We didn't even have a computer at home, but I took the course and I loved it. And I connected with the teacher. I loved the work. I took it all the way through high school. And it was the only class I just took because I loved it, not because I felt like I had to. And by the end of it, my teacher said, you could do this as a career. And I had no idea because locally, growing up in a rural, remote community, we didn't have jobs like that. But he brought in papers from a big city, which for me was Toronto. And he showed me these job postings to prove like, this is a real job. You can do this. And so I went to school for programming and I've been in IT and software development my whole career. So shout out to that teacher.
That is very interesting. Thanks all of you for sharing. And I think it's pretty excited to see that all of you have a little bit a different angle how you entered actually engineering, what means there is not one way, there are many different ways. What I want to mention now, what actually is a little bit unfortunate, what some research shows that almost about 40% of women who study engineering, starting their career in engineering, leaving the workforce after a little while, or are not even able, or not able is the wrong word, are not starting after they finish their studies. What is quite I personally feel an alarming number, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about it and ideas maybe what we can do to support and change this, or what could be the reasons for that. So let's start. Katya, let's start with you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I guess hearing that stat, I mean, it's kind of surprising. It's definitely unfortunate. I'm curious how it compares to other industries and other degrees. Because maybe it's just like every degree, people just change their mind and switch, which is like totally normal. But I think for me personally, actually, I went to U of T for computer science and I had a lot of female professors. And I think that made a big difference. Because I think at one point I was chatting with one of my professors and I was kind of saying that I never really felt like I was at a disadvantage by like being a woman studying computer science, even though obviously the classes were like 90% men. And she was like, well, that is because more than 50% of the faculty are women. So I think it really starts with leadership and having those people you can look up to and see people who are similar to you doing the same thing that you want to do, that you can kind of look up to as mentors. Yeah, what do you guys think, Alana, Lisa?
Yeah, I think I love kind of your first question, which is like the why, like why is this happening? If it wasn't a good fit and they moved on, that's great to learn that. But if it's something in the environment that's not setting people up for success, then for sure. And I think we know that. And I think the leadership example is a great one. And as well, Lisa, your example of how you got exposed from a young age, like that's super helpful. I didn't have that. And, can we do more to expose younger girls to learn more about this as an opportunity? So I've spent time volunteering with young girls who have interest in STEM to show them computer programming or development as a way to, have a career path in those interests. I think there's a lot of great things happening on a lot of different levels. So that some of these things are super impactful.
I agree. Giving you a little bit more insights on the why, unfortunately, based on the studies, is very a stereotypical treatment. So unfortunately, women were not taken as serious as male partners. So those are the reason based on the studies again. Why at one point they left or didn't even start it after they finished an internship.
Yeah, for me, the statistics are upsetting, but what's more upsetting is that I'm 20 plus years into my career now, and the people who roll up into those statistics, some of them were my friends along the way. And so I know the intimate details of their stories, and knowing what has happened to some of my friends, it's crushing. Like, some of the stories bring tears to my eyes, especially around women who chose to have families and then how they were treated, who just went through really difficult life circumstances and weren't given support, or expected to do, things they should never have been asked to do, or being pushed into responsibilities that weren't core technical and thus deprived of other opportunities. Like, they're just like, it's not really a statistic for me. It's a very emotionally triggering thing, because they were my friends. And so I think that, in terms of changing it, going back to where we started on this question, like, the leadership has to reflect. And I see a lot of companies who are saying, well, we'll bring in someone who will be an expert in DEI, or it's the job of recruitment to build a diverse funnel. If you're not willing to accept responsibility and say, this is my job and I need to look in the mirror and what am I going to do different? If you think you're going to pass the responsibility off to someone else, you're not ready to create that environment. Like, everyone has to look in the mirror and do some actual hard work. And sometimes it means getting your feelings hurt, because we all have egos. And maybe people don't want to be accused of being not diverse, or having racial biases, or all those things. Those topics are hard, but we have to be open. We're going to get our feelings hurt. We're going to find out that we've got blind spots and biases. And we have to, listen to other people's perspectives and be willing to make the change. And I was at a race recently, and a friend was holding a sign that said, "It's a hill, get over it." And I feel like a lot of it is like that. Like, every single leader in tech needs to be like, this gender lack of diversity is a problem. It's a hill. We've got to do some work and get over it.
I like this approach a lot. I think it's important for everyone to be okay to be uncomfortable, right? Because those conversations, those blind spots you mentioned, make us feel uncomfortable. No one wants to publicly say, oh, I have a blind spot. So I think this is very, very important. And taking the angle of leadership, I'm curious, when the three of you did the step from an individual contributor into leadership, how did that feel for you? How was the support, or maybe what were the challenges when you took the step? Lisa, if you want to continue.
Sure. So I just moved into leadership just over a year ago, formally. I mean, I've been in program management roles and things like that, like informal leadership. So I think like most women, but I also know that men struggle with this too. A lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, and I hate it. I'd like to strike that term from our vocabulary. But there's definitely, you step into a new role and you're like, oh, can I really do this? Or even before you accept the role, you might look at it and think, should I even apply? Can I really do this? And for me, I kind of just looked at the landscape. We have a pretty senior team. We already have a lot of technical experts. We've got staff platform engineers. We've got senior team members. And that wouldn't be the part I excel at, coming in and defining how we implement features and defining our technical roadmap. But that's not what the team needed. The team needed help because we're scaling very quickly, and communications break down when you grow teams quickly and you subdivide them. And processes, you can get away with no process when you're very, very little and you all sit in the same room. You go remote, you grow your teams, then you have to build processes. People want someone who cares about them and helps them grow in their career. And so I kind of like, instead of focusing on this insecurity around, well, I can't do those things as well as someone else on the team, I focused on the things I can do really well. And that was really helpful for me. So I would encourage anyone who's kind of wondering about moving from individual contributor to leadership, like, don't feel like you have to be the best at everything. As long as you're surrounded by some other people, for me, I've just tried to double down on the things that I can do really well.
Yeah, I was gonna add, yeah, I think I really like that, like focus on things you can do really well. And the really nice thing about leadership is that you can hire people to complement the things that you don't do well. So it actually, like that self-awareness can be really helpful in determining like what kind of people you need to hire. Um, for me, let's see. Well, I started my path into leadership was because I started BioRender, and it was kind of like out of necessity. I needed to grow the company. I needed to hire people. So I just kind of dived into leadership head first. I didn't really like understand what leadership meant. I stumbled a lot. I, hired some wrong people for the wrong roles, and I had to like learn a lot from making mistakes. And I think a lot of like I think a lot of like my insecurities are earlier on, they were because of like a lack of experience, rather than like anything else. I just like I didn't even know what I didn't know, right? Like I didn't even know who to go to and like who to get help from. And that's kind of the, if you are a leader and your team is growing and your company is growing, that's going to be the case kind of always, because you're constantly challenged. The team needs to change. You need to change with it, and it's normal. And I think I guess I'm better at like figuring out what I don't know and how I can like find people to like help me and support me now, than I did in the beginning. But I think that was, if I could go back to like that first period when I first started, like I guess growing and managing and hiring a team, it would be to like really find people who've like done it before many times and like spend like hours with them, really trying to understand what are the things that break when you do all these new things and how you can learn from like their experience, and yeah, and not make the same mistakes. But sometimes, you have to make mistakes in order to do the thing. And until you do the thing, I guess like having the confidence that you can do something only comes by like having done it. So you kind of have to go through all the pain, and then you'll be able to do it.
That makes sense. Thanks, Katya. Alana, please.
Cool. Yeah. So my first leadership role was non-technical. It was not even a technical company. And I basically took a 2-year gap from engineering to do this. And from an experience perspective, it was great. I learned a lot very quickly. I learned a lot about leadership and management. And ultimately, I really do credit those roles for a lot of my skill set later, and so I think, often we think about how traditional the path needs to be for it to be a stepping stone, and it's just not true. All these different things that we do in our careers, or even on the side, or however you may think about skill sets and growing, they all count. And so maybe sometimes you have to tell that story, though. That's the hard part. That's always been the hard part for me, which is like, I've had these experiences and I know that they've helped me to grow, to be a better leader, better communicator, better in my role generally. But if it's not clear how, then we've got to work on how to tell that story. And in doing that, it also helps us to understand, I think, the ways that we grew in those roles. So I would say, definitely seeking opportunities that aren't, traditional is a great way to get leadership experience. And ultimately, I think I'm the same as Katya. I came up through entrepreneurship. So I started HiMama about 8 years ago or something along those lines. And yeah, so now we've grown and my role has really changed and evolved. But I do credit those earlier pieces in allowing me to grow and tackle some of these challenges. And of course, along the way, whatever it is that we do, to try to give ourselves these opportunities. I mean, that's just so important if you're ever, asking. And I think that what Lisa said around that is true, and Katya was like, if you're ever questioning, do I have the skills? But speak up for yourself. Ask. Put yourself out there, which is super hard, right? Because there's always the chance of failure or rejection. But ultimately, it's there's some quote around missing shots you don't take. Like you miss them all if you don't take them, right? So I definitely think that's big.
That is interesting. Thank you. While we are in this, what would you recommend? I know you said take the shot, speak up for yourself, get out there. But we have a lot of women attending right now who are in this situation right now. They are on the senior, looking maybe into leadership role. What advice outside of this would you give them to really take the shot? How can they be heard? What is, based on your experience and how you do it in your organization, a good way to maybe also being an ally for them?
One thing that I thought of, I guess I'll say maybe something short, is I think coming with ideas is always helpful, to frame it and thinking about how your growth matches the goals and the growth of your team or the company or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Those things are always helpful, and at least a helpful start of a conversation. Maybe you don't have all the answers because maybe nobody does, but at least coming to a conversation with your manager or an ally or somebody you look up to in your current spot, or a advisor or a mentor, like all of these resources are great potential starts.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Also, like, why are you interested in leadership? Because like not everyone in engineering wants to go into management and go down that career path. And I think people kind of have different reasons for it. And usually I think it's around having more impact and building teams that are happy and productive and can accomplish great things by like pushing in the same direction. And if that's your reason, I think that there is a lot of ways you can do that like before you even like officially step into that role. And you can kind of test it, and you can work with your team, your manager, your leadership in your company to figure out how to test that. But generally, like when I see those qualities, when I see someone who wants to do that on my team, I'm really happy. I embrace it. I'm like, yes, let's figure out how we can make it work and how we can kind of test things, because it's not for everyone. Some people like really they are more happy on like the technical track. So figuring out ways to test whether it's something that you'd be interested in doing in like a kind of for like a project or some sort of like safe space where you can like go back to your previous role, I think is like a really good way to like kind of start. Or you could also dive head first and see how that goes.
For me, I would just encourage women not to self-screen. I see that so much, and men do it too. But they say, I would love to speak at a conference. I'd love to speak at an event. I'd love to apply for that role, but I have nothing to talk about. But I don't have the education yet. I don't have the work experience yet. I don't have the whatever. And I'm like, don't self-screen. You just ruled yourself out. You never even gave the conference organizer or the hiring manager or anyone the chance to assess you because you decided that you weren't qualified. Let them decide. You don't know who else is going to apply to that role. And there's a lot of awareness that we need to diversify. So, leverage that and put your name out there and go for stuff, because I just see so many people that just screen themselves out. Or really your worst case scenario is you hear nothing or you hear no. and we don't die from hearing no. So risk it. The reward is totally worth it.
Thank you. That's very encouraging. Changing the angle now a little bit. So what we can do as a woman to ask for it, but what can an organization to do actually to create a safe environment that I can ask and I feel comfortable to ask this question or ask for the support to get there. Totally, as Katya, as you mentioned, leadership is not for everyone. Maybe they want to go direction staff engineer, and that's totally fine. But what can an organization do to create this environment that we feel comfortable to have this conversation?
I think just like asking people what they want to do, I think, and like listening to what they say and helping them try, like working with them on how to get there is like really kind of the simple answer. I think as our company grows, we definitely feel the need to like introduce some management training and some like processes around like how we do one-on-ones and things like that to make sure that everyone is getting those opportunities and having those conversations with their managers. But yeah, I think it's just, for the most part, it's making sure you have leaders who care about people on their teams, and they will ask them about what they want to do and what their ambitions and goals are, and they will listen to what those things are, and then they'll try to help them. I think that's as an organization, that's the most important thing you can do. And it doesn't really have to do anything with diversity. It's just how to have like happy people that are working, like doing the best work of their lives and are growing.
I'll chime in with a don't do, because I have a friend who lived this one where an all-male leadership team said, we really need a woman for this opening. And her experience was miserable. She sucked it up for like 6-9 months. And then she walked away because they wanted it to be her job to change and make everything good, right? But they didn't want to do any work themselves. It was kind of like, well, we'll find a woman for this job and then everything will be better. But you can't really put that on the one woman or the one whatever that you need to, if the entire company is under 25 and you say, well, let's bring in someone who's older, and then expect them to do all of the work because they're the one with the life experience. Like, you just can't hire one and expect them to do everything. So, I'd say go for that 30% number is important. Like, bring in, multiple. It's easier for someone to speak up if they're not the only one. If there's 3 women, then it's easier to sort of advocate for one another. And then also, again, take responsibility. Don't put the onus for change on that person who's the underrepresented person. That's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. It was kind of along the lines of, I think, how I think about this as well, which is that, and my experience that, inclusive practices, they need to be evolving, and we do need to be a little bit honest about where we are today. What truly can the company and the team support with respect to diversity? Where are we today? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? How do we put those things in place, those practices, to make sure everybody can be successful in their role, no matter who we bring on, and to be honest about that. We can work with HR to develop these company-wide programs. We can work within teams, different at different levels. I mean, Katya, you gave some great advice as well for one-on-ones and individuals. But, for us at HiMama, this has certainly been a journey. If we looked at where we were 5 years ago and where we are today, and where I hope we will be in, next year and the year after, it's continuing to evolve, and it's something that we work on together as a company. And there's kind of different levels. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about like more of the specifics, but, I would say, like, I think an assessment, is like kind of a first step to avoid what Lisa described, right?
That makes
totally
sense.
Yeah, like being aware of what your problems are.
Yeah.
So that you can actually do something to solve them.
This makes sense. I also see some comments here in our chat where some Daria mentioned that a friend of her quitted leadership after a couple of years because it was so intense. And I can speak about this as well. And friends who've been in leadership, sometimes it comes to a point it feels like a constant fight, kind of proving always, what can be very exhausting, right? And I think it's important for an organization to even not have this environment that, and I will speak about every diversity, right? Of course, gender is important, but it's the same as counts for all the others. Speaking about the angle you just took, Alana, I want to dig a little bit deeper into this, because I think it's great to learn from each other what practices work, or also maybe some mistakes we did, but we learned through it, like you all mentioned already, specifically to maybe give some advice to other organizations who are at the beginning at the journey, or again, we all constantly learning, right? It's a journey. It's there is no final step. So speaking about, let's break it down. If we are looking into attraction, promotion, retention, let's start with the attraction part. What would you think or can think about what worked well for you? Maybe also what didn't, but you learned through it in order to attract more diversity.
I wish I had figured it out. I'd write a book if I had, and I think I could sell 1 million copies. I try to listen to other people whose life experiences are different than myself. We have had some great, our investors have provided us with resources. So that's been really good. Like our investors work with a portfolio of startup companies. And so they've aggregated a lot of learnings across a lot of startup companies. And so if you have a network like that you can tap into, and events like these are really helpful. And a plug for VanHack, like the candidate funnels we get from VanHack are much more diverse than what we get from a straight up job site. And so looking for the funnels that will target diversity and sort of curate a more diverse funnel is really, really helpful.
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, do an analysis of your website. You know, if a candidate is going to find you in different areas of the web or anywhere, how does that look? Are you giving the right message through that? Yeah, VanHack is great. I guess within the process, who candidates are talking to, make sure there's diversity within the reviewing and interviewing process, so that they're getting a sense of that when they're considering.
Yeah, I agree. I think like top of the funnel of like recruiting is key, because obviously it's like very upstream, as well as having like women in leadership, very upstream. I think those two things. For us, I think we've been kind of lucky that we're this like intersection of like science, art, and technology, so that attracts people from like all sorts of backgrounds. And our team is actually 50% women, including leadership roles. And we do try to we focus a lot on like the sourcing part. So our talent team cares about diversity, and they will do like diversity sourcing sprints for like a new role. They'll try to, like, for first 1 or 2 weeks, they'll mostly try to focus on sourcing diverse candidates just to increase that top of the funnel. But I think also just, having this environment where like we have 2 of the 3 founders are women. We are in this like diverse, where they have this like mission that requires like diversity of perspectives and attracts like a diversity of talent. I think all of those things are really, really helpful, because it doesn't feel like we're fighting. Like it feels like, I guess if you could get those like upstream things right, everything else is a little bit easier. Not that we're like perfect by any means. Obviously, like our engineering is still like skewed heavily to be men, but I think we have had more success at it than a lot of the other companies.
Thank you. What I'm hearing from all of you, so sourcing for diversity, having sprints and the start at the panel. Do you think diversity goals are important? Do you have diversity goals if it comes to hiring?
We don't have anything in writing. I don't know if we should. Maybe that's bad. Now I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Sorry, it didn't mean, it's a question, right? Because it's a very common topic that people speak about.
Yeah.
That's why I'm curious.
We also don't have anything in writing. We don't have anything specific, or like for a specific role. We're not like, oh, we need to get this type of person in this role. But I think when we evaluate candidates, I think it's part of the conversation in terms of like how we think about like what will make the team the most happy and productive. Like when we are thinking about like hiring for a specific role, we think about it how this role is going to like influence the whole team. But yeah, we don't really have like quotas. I think if anything, it only makes sense to have quotas at like the sourcing level. Yeah, because that's the highest leverage you can invest in terms of having a diverse team.
Yeah, that really sums up kind of our approach as well. Our goals and our requirements are definitely on a diversity of having multiple funnels like we've been talking about and making sure that we keep those active.
That makes sense. Thank you for sharing. I know, Lisa, you mentioned you got some good resources from your investors. So it's important to have a network who shares best practices. Is there anything specifically you would love to highlight what you felt did work very well and you feel okay sharing with everyone?
One thing that does work well, if you can build some diversity, it's like an object in motion, is easier to pick up speed. It's difficult to, if you are, I'll pick on white males, sorry. But if it's an all white male team, you're going to have a hard time getting those first ones because they're just going to look at your website and be like, no. But if they can look at your website, say, and they can see some staff pictures that aren't stock pictures that you took from the internet and be like, okay, I can see someone who looks like me at your company already. It's much easier, I think, to overcome that barrier. So if you can get a little bit of diversity, like our jobs that are shared from employees who are part of an underrepresented demographic, draw more applicants from other underrepresented demographics. So if you can get that ball rolling, then you can tap your own employee group to then continue to build on that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense, right? If we see someone who represents us, we feel excited to apply and be part of the team. Speaking now about this, we were coming from the angle of attraction. Of course, what is as important as attraction is actually the retention. How, and here we are speaking about the inclusion piece. Now we got diversity. Now what we do in order to make them feel heard, feel welcomed in our organization. I know we touched a little bit before, but do you have some best practices you can share here? What works very well? Alana, feel free to start.
Sure. I think on a macro level, of course, we are trying to make it clear what success looks like in the role. Doing our part to ensure everyone can be successful then, and what that means to them as individuals can be, different. So really understanding that kind of goes back to the journey, right? Hopefully, and then some of the, I guess, more specifically, some of the things that we've done that have been successful, setting guidelines to aid in engagement and communication. So personal manuals, compassionate code review guidelines. We've also had a lot of success with some internal programs that are more grassroots led. We have like a diversity, inclusion, and belonging committee, which then holds a D&I calendar, and we have recurring internal sessions and dialogue so that people can, it's both like learning and safe place to grow. That's been really great for us.
Yeah, I guess to add to everything. I think it's just like, again, we do like listening to what people want to do and giving them opportunities to do it as kind of like a key piece to retention. And yeah, whether it's like they want to take an AWS course or they're speaking at a conference, and like we'll have them like present to the team as like a practice round so they can get feedback. So I guess like a bit of like personalization, and then also like listening to any feedback that they give you. I guess it's in leadership, you don't always have them the the best. You need a lot of feedback, I guess. Like if your company is kind of like a product, right? That people experience every day, then how? Oh, Stephanie left. I'm sure she'll come back. But yeah, like getting that feedback is invaluable, and obviously you can kind of like assess all the feedback that you get, but like hearing it out and seeing if there's like truth in it, whether it's around like inclusion or how people feel or your onboarding experience. It's all it's all really, really valuable. And I think just like having a feedback loop where you can like iterate and implement some of those changes, and if you do that successfully, like the company will also see that you are taking feedback too hard and you're doing something about it, and that builds a lot of trust and builds good culture. I guess Stephanie's having some issues with maybe her internet or hop in.
I think the feedback is a really great thing to highlight. Completely agree with you. Do you what different channels, I guess, do you use?
Yeah, we have we actually recently, so we've been doing performance reviews every 6 months, which is more, I guess, like individual feedback as well as peer, as well as upward. But recently we really wanted to get people to give more frank feedback to each other, especially like the peer feedback. We found that everyone's like out of this world. And so my co-founder and we at all hands, I actually gave him feedback. And I gave him like pretty harsh constructive feedback, and I wrote it down and we put it on the screen. And I was like, I told him things that, like, I mean, a lot of people that he works with, they would agree with it, and we went through it, and he accepted it. He accepted all of it. He did challenge some of it, and then he came back and we kind of talked through, like as if it was a one-on-one. We talked through how he is going to try to improve and what are the things he is going to do. So we did this in front of the whole company. So I think that's more of like a cultural example to like try to get people to give more frank feedback to each other. And I think if we can do that successfully, then we'll hear more feedback. But generally, yeah, I get feedback from like conversations one-on-one with the team, as well as we have some channels for people to be able to like submit feedback. Yeah. And like pulse check surveys and things like that. I guess more formal channels.
Sorry, I was gone for a little bit. Hopin kicked me out. Having a question about the feedback, because I totally agree. Feedback is such a powerful tool, right? But I'm curious, you said you have some channels for feedback. Is it anonymous, or people actually share as a person? Because sometimes it can influence the feedback. Or do you have this culture of radical candor? It's okay. I think it's amazing if we're at a stage like this that everyone really can share. I'm just curious if you can share a little bit more.
Yeah, we used to have an anonymous feedback form, and then we discontinued it because we felt like it didn't align well with like our culture and our values. So now it's mostly through either like we do like pulse checks, performance reviews. Like pulse checks, I guess, is more like feedback on the company. Typically, we just try to get like, if on the executive team we're like arguing about like what we should do, we're like, let's ask the team, let's ask. So depending on like the issue, we'll either ask the managers to provide their input, or we'll ask the whole company to provide their input. And it's been really interesting because we'll be like arguing and we're like always wrong. We're like always wrong about what people actually want. So yeah, it's always insightful. I think just taking what people want into account when you're making decisions is kind of the framework to think around. And then however you do it is, I mean, it's usually some sort of survey or like a poll.
Thank you for sharing a little bit more insight. Lisa, I didn't want to cut you out. Sorry for that. Please go ahead.
On creating the culture of feedback. Yeah, we try multiple forums. There's the formal survey that goes to all employees, and there's informal. We do peer feedbacks at least twice a year, which is free form. And I try to set an example. And I would say, like, I don't think this is another one I don't think we've figured out yet. There's definitely people on our team who feel very comfortable giving peer feedback directly. They don't need a leader involved. They don't need a survey. And then there's other ones who would not give feedback, under any circumstance. They don't feel comfortable, or they only feel comfortable giving positive feedback. Great job. Great job. I like working with you. But I think it goes back to the continuous improvement. You have to reflect all the time. So you look at, if you do it quarterly, look at how it went and what else can we do, and can we tailor this to get the most feedback out of certain individuals, because some people are going to avoid confrontation, so they're not going to have a direct conversation. They're going to be more comfortable with a different channel. So make a lot of different types of channels available to try to solicit the feedback from all the different personality types in your organization.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Speaking about feedback, and also Alana, what you mentioned, you said compassionate code reviews. So all this aligns a little bit. I don't know if you heard about, probably you did, sorry, bringing in more empathy into the engineering world, what comes into code reviews, into conversations, feedback. I'm curious. I think it's a very interesting approach. Curious to hear a little bit more what you think about it.
Sure. So in my experience, yeah, the key thing is we're really trying to foster an environment where a diverse team does feel safe. Creating a space for all voices to be heard, to have that vulnerability. And I think empathy is an important piece to that puzzle, typically, being able to learn about people's unique experiences to help open our minds up to that and have more patience, the ability to connect and be vulnerable. It's hard to do, it's definitely a journey like that we're trying to get better at, but it is something that we, I guess one tool that we employ is we quite deliberately talk about it. So we, I forget who, I can't give credit to the person, but there's an idea of stages of a team where they form, and then they storm, and then they norm, and then they conjourn, or they all rhyme, but they're great. And we actually define those and talk about those together, and talk about ways we can kind of get to the next level, and basically we're basically evolving and developing, hopefully, safety as we go along to do that. But yeah, some of these guidelines, vulnerability within management, empathy building. So these are a lot of the things that we strive to do. And yeah. How about...
It works very well, right?
Sometimes it's easier than other times. But I think, we have to keep pushing it for sure.
Something that ties in is a no blame culture, and that's something that we talk about a lot. And it's one thing to say it, it's one thing to put it in the employee manual, but we remind people all the time, every retrospective, every biweekly, right? If something's gone wrong, hey, AWS costs spiked 60% yesterday. This is a no blame culture, and we need to know what happened. So or we broke prod, right? And that change wasn't reviewed by anyone. This is a no blame culture. And what happened? Because we need to fix the process. The person is rarely to blame. It's a process failure in most cases, maybe all cases, right? Like there's always so much context and circumstance around things. And so we try to remind people all the time, this is a no blame culture, and we're still going to get to the root cause and talk about it. And then people feel safe being like, I made a mistake and, I accidentally ordered $10,000 worth of data. I'm really sorry. And we're like, okay, we'll put it in control. Thanks for being honest and saving us a lot of running around. And, we'll look at the process that allowed that to happen because, you didn't realize that your account had the ability to order data and you thought you could just make a test case that called, order data every 5 minutes or whatever, right?
Right. We also say us against the problem. That's kind of a phrase that we use a lot. Yeah.
That's nice. I like it. And I like the no blame culture. I think that's very, very important, right? So everyone feels okay to share. I just want to be, as much as I would love to continue the conversation, I'm just going to be conscious about the time, and we have just 5 minutes left. So if that's okay, I would just like to jump on one final question. So the audience can learn a little bit more about you. And it's really, if you're looking into last year, what was the best decision you have done? It can be personally, it can be professionally. Just curious. It's a big question, I know.
I think at first, for me, it's like getting that support, kind of like I was saying when I was starting out, I was stumbling a lot and I didn't really have that support. And I joined the CTO forum group about a year ago, and that's been really, really helpful. So we meet once a month for like 3 hours and we talk through any like personal, professional issues. It's always the same group, but there's like a professional moderator. So that's been incredibly helpful because leadership can feel very, very isolating, can feel like a lot of the issues that you're facing are like personal to you and your company, and you don't have like a safe space to talk about them with like you don't have a lot of people to talk about them with. So that's been really, really nice. And I also recently started coaching as well. I got a coach actually like about a month ago, and I experienced that like aha moment of coaching where I came in with a problem and I was like, help me fix this problem, like very tactical problem. And he was like, what energy are you bringing today? And I was like, well, I'm anxious. He's like, I feel like you are trying to find like a shortcut to some like an underlying issue. And he made me kind of question like what energy I come into the room with and how it affects my team. And I think just having that perspective was incredibly helpful. I was like, wow, okay, I should have gotten a coach a long time ago. But yeah, like finding that support, I think, has been really helpful in the last year.
I love that. Sometimes we think we are alone with a problem, right? And don't get to connect with others. Lisa, what would you like to share from your end?
Yeah, I would say for me, just saying yes to opportunities when they're presented, because there's always like 100 reasons to say no. Would you want to take on this challenge? Oh, I can't because someone else would do it better. I can't because I have kids at home and that requires travel. I can't because, but saying yes is the only way to build your career. Everything's a stepping stone to something else. And so being willing to, there's like a voice in our head that's always being like, you can't because, you shouldn't because, no, you're not qualified. And as a distance runner, it's mental toughness. And so you have to learn to crush that voice a lot. You get a lot of practice at, no, you can't run that far. No, you can't run that fast. No, you can't go out because it's snowing. It's just like crushing that voice down a lot. And you have to practice that. So say yes a lot to practice crushing that no voice until you can feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think sometimes when I don't have time to like think about taking things on, it's like the best because I just do things without questioning it too much.
Yeah, someone gave me a quote that was, if you're in your head, you're dead. And I often reflect on that, which I think is similar. Like, don't overthink it, say yes, don't, just do it. So I love that. It's great.
I think that is a very nice way to end our session today. Really, just go for it. Just do it. Try. Feel comfortable. Lisa, Katya, Alana, I want to say a big thank you for joining us today, sharing your perspective. I know we all learned a lot, and yeah, now we're gonna kick off our Women in Tech hiring fair. So I think we are 1 minute away. So everyone who's joining now for JavaScript, please join us to the session for the JavaScript. And yeah, Alana, Katya, Lisa, thanks again for being here today with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone who attended.
Yeah, thank you.
It's so nice to connect with you, Alana and Lisa.
Same to you. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.